Howdy folks, Spencer here, and today I'll be reviewing the Pakled Clumpship from Star Trek Lower Decks. As always, chapters to each topic are listed below. And to start things off, let's go over how you can acquire this ship. So there's 3 different ways you can go about it. The first 2 are going to cost you either real money or in-game resources, and the third is via future event campaigns, such as Event Campaign 8, which would be starting in 2026. You see, the Clumpship here is an Infinity promotional pack ship. Promo ships like this are the most expensive single character unlock ships in the game, as they come from either the R&D or Duty Officer promo packs, which are only available in the Zen store for a limited time following promo ship releases and during certain sales throughout the year. On top of the gamble packs that contain the ship having very limited availability due to the FOMO sales tactic the devs utilize, these packs also have a very low drop rate and no guaranteed pity point, which I have covered in the lockbox drop rates revealed video that you see up on screen. If you want to check that out further, I'll have that linked in the description and pinned comment down below. And thankfully, if you don't want to gamble for it, it is a ship that is tradable, so you'll find every now and then that there might be a listing of one up on the player exchange where you can acquire it for EC. And if you're in any trade channels or zone chat, you may see someone trading it for EC or some other assets as well. But being a promotional ship, be prepared to shell out quite a bit of EC or other assets to acquire it. And then the third way that you could acquire it would again be via future event campaigns. Now, with this being a ship released in 2025, the event campaign that is currently going on in 2025, Event Campaign 7, is not going to have this ship as an option in it. That is a limitation to these event campaigns, that the only ships in the premium T6 box are ships from before the year of the event campaign. And you can see here that the Pakled and any of the other ships released in 2025 are indeed not in the premium ship box. But again, the event campaign starting in 2026, Event Campaign 8, would have this ship and the other 2025 ships in there as a reward option. And now that we're past the depressing acquisition segment, let's go over one of the strongest points of the ship, the visuals. Now, a lot of credit here goes to Pundus. Pundus put a ton of work in to give us a ton of customization options here based on the Clumpship seen in Season 2 of Lower Decks. There's a great thread over on Blue Sky from Pundus that also gives some background into the art side of things here, so I'll have that link down below for those interested. And heading over to the tailor, there is no unique interior, so just put whatever bridge is your favorite on. The material is locked to just ship paint here because of all of the customization options. Windows are also limited. Now, if you want to open up the customizations, you need to go to Advanced here. And what you're going to find is that there's actually quite a few customization options here, and you can see why they had to restrict the windows and material. So for the ship body, you've got an option to just keep it green there. There's a brown version, blue. For the front of ship, that is a Mondor freighter, I believe. And they have a bunch of different options for that. Also with like an extra pod on the top there, as you can see. Or in different locations. Then middle of the ship here, this is going to allow you to change the cables around. And also under the front here, you can see that will change those pods. It'll remove them. It'll change the cables that are up on top. So you do have quite a few customization options there. Now for the back of the ship, you have a ton of different options for the color of the engines. You've got orange, pink, purple, red, teal, yellow, and green, of course. And then you can have it be this green color, or you can have it be brown. Now for the guns here, you have 2 different options. You can see these Klingon cannons here. Alternatively, there's also these that you can put on. And I love the names here. Pointy Shooter or Strong Shooter. Really great names. And then there's the Things to Make Us Go. So this is going to let you customize the nacelles. You can see they have a lot of options, including broken there. Blue Thing to Make Us Go is broken. I really love the detail here in these names. And thing to hold ship. You can have this be two different colors there. So a brown or a different brown. Now, one of the really fun things to do specifically with this ship is to just go and hit the randomize button as well. So you can go in, set this to a specific combo of colors that you like. You can put patterns on and, get some customization that way. But I really find hitting the randomize button just nets you some very interesting combos. And to be honest, I really like that first one it gave me. This here, that's a neat combo. So you've got a ton of customization options, and because of all the different variations that they have here with the styles, they had to limit the materials and windows. But, again, you're getting a different layer of customization here, and you can really dive into the randomness of this if you want, and that really is the big appeal of this ship. You can, go in, customize the colors to whatever you want. It's a really fun ship visually. And just to give you guys an idea of the size of this, you can see there's a Valkys, there is a Defiant. I'm assuming that is Ilawani there, or it's some sort of constellation variant. Let's see. Yeah, it's an Awani. And then over here is a Gagarin variant. So it is definitely a bit of a larger ship. And next up, I want to take a look at some Vanity Shields on the ship. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to go through some of the popular ones like Bottle Section 31 and the Platinum. So starting with the Bottle Vanity Shield here. So, the bottle just really blacks the ship out. And if that's what you're looking for, then, that's certainly a viable option. Though a shield like this on this ship does feel like a bit of a waste. One of the big appeals to this ship is it being a mishmash of parts, and you're sort of taking away from that with the Vandy shield. So let's take a look now at the Section 31. So not quite as dark, but a bit of a different color scheme if that's what you're looking for. And then Platinum's the only other one I'll be looking at here today. And yeah, Platinum tends to look good on everything, but again, the theme of this ship is really about it being a mishmash of parts, so with that being one of the main draws to the ship, I just sort of feel like the Vandy Shields are taking away from that. And heading over to the stats, this has one of the highest hull modifiers out there at 1.6, but in exchange it does have a rather low shield mod at 0.95. It has a 4-4 weapons layout, 4 device slots. For the consoles, you've got 4 TAC and Inge, 3 Science, and 1 Universal with the stock layout. Once you take it to T6X2, you're going to get access to a total of 3 Universal console slots. The mobility stats are on the lower side. This has a base turn rate of 5.5, an impulse mod of 0.17, inertia of 35, so if you've flown any of the slower moving big ships in the game before, like the Enterprise J, this is going to move like that. For the power buffs, you have +5 to engine and shield, and then +10 to weapon and ox. And it is a battlecruiser with the Battlecruiser Mastery Package, so it does also have the ability to run dual cannons. Being a Merc Worker ship, it does have the Innovation Ship Mechanic and the Merc Worker Slipstream. And according to the blog, this ship is supposed to have a built-in sensor analysis. This would not be the first cruiser or even battlecruiser to have a built-in sensor analysis. For reference, the Talshar adapted battlecruiser in the Lobby store does also have one of these built in. However, I've had the ship since around its release on PC, and guess what it doesn't actually have? It doesn't have sensor analysis. So either the blog is wrong, or they just forgot to actually give the ship sensor analysis. And it's not mentioned on the blog, but this is a battlecruiser, so it does have access to the cruiser commands a battlecruiser has access to. So that is your weapon system efficiency, the shield one, and then the engine one. So You don't have attract fire, which is going to be a negative if you were looking to set this up as a tank. And heading over to the Bridge Officer setup, this has a Commander Universal with Miracle Worker, a Lieutenant Commander Engineer with Command, Lieutenant Commander Tactical, Lieutenant Universal, and Ensign Universal. At face value, that Commander Universal leads you to believe that this is a rather flexible layout, but it is actually quite restricted. Say for instance you want to run a Gravel on the ship. Well, there's 2 Lieutenant Commanders, but they're locked into Eng and then TAC, meaning that the only place you could run a Gravwell is on the Commander Universal. And that then means you need to fully commit the Commander to Science in order to do that. And while you could make that work for some niche side tank setups, with this also having that command seating for Suppression Barrage 1, keep in mind that this is a battlecruiser, so it doesn't have access to attract fire, one of the really handy tools a tank typically has in their arsenal. Overall, the ship stats and the Bridge Officer layout really don't do that much for me. With this being an expensive promo ship, you'd have hoped that the stats would have been more impressive, but that is not the direction they went with this ship. Now, even though I'm not fond of the stats and layout of the ship, it is still worth noting you can build it out and play content perfectly fine with it. I've got some example Bridge Officer layouts up on screen for it now, for tanking, energy weapon layouts, and torps. But for each of those playstyles, this ship is not going to be anywhere near the top of the list for any of them. To be blunt, I don't think you're buying this ship for its stats. It really isn't that good in that department. Its appeal is coming from the visual aspect of it. It is a very unique looking ship, and potentially the accessories, which I'll be covering here in a moment. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on the ship comparisons because, this ship, I think it's quite clear, is really just not that good in the stats department. But I do want to note that there is the Zenkethi Zentar Dreadnought Carrier that is also a promo ship, so it comes from the exact same box. And while that does have a lower hull modifier, it does have substantially higher shield mod. It's got slightly better mobility, but most importantly, that is going to have a 5-2 weapons layout with 2 hangar bays. So if you're really wanting the Miracle Worker and Command specialization combo and you have a promo box, that Zenkethi Zentar, which, yes, it's a bit old, 7.5 years old at this point, that is still a better ship than the Pakled here. The Pakled, you can do some interesting niche things on it, just like with the Talshar adapted battlecruiser from the Lobby store. But, for what it cost, that is a very, very hard sell. And for the Admiralty card, this is 60 for engineering, 29 for science, 37 for TAC, and the special is ignores plus or minus inch from events. Next up is the Universal Console, Pakled Technological Spacehook. Passives are +5 maximum power for each subsystem in exchange for -25% power transfer rate. And just to be clear, that -25% power transfer rate, typically when you see a plus or minus power transfer rate buff, that is just taking that number off. So typically -25 would be just subtracting 25 from 257 here, taking you down to 232. But that is very much not the case here. So I'm at 257 without the console on, and with it on, it is taking a final 25% hit there to that power transfer rate number. So for a lot of people, regardless of what I say about the rest of this console, that being an actual 25% reduction to your power transfer rate just immediately killed the value of the console for you. And as for the clicky, this is going to deal a different damage type and scale differently based on what console slot you have it in. So in attack slot, it is doing phaser damage, meaning it'll be buffed by phaser, and it will scale with weapon power. In an inch slot, it does plasma damage, and that scales with engine power and, of course, plasma buffs. In a science slot, it does anti-proton damage, so AP buffs will help it, and it scales with shield power, and it also heavily scales with EPG skill. And in a universal console slot, it does kinetic damage that scales with aux power. Now, for testing, I put this on my Mirror Angle Plasma CSV setup, which is a very heavy on con build, and I took it through a bunch of solo ISCs. From all the testing I did with that Plasma CSV setup, I found it worked best in a universal console slot doing kinetic damage for me. I had it doing around 50 to 60k on runs where I was doing just a smidge over 2 million, and that's not bad, but I do have a ton of other consoles that are hitting around that mark that are not applying a minus 25 power transfer rate debuff to me. So as soon as I finished the testing, I took the console off and I haven't put it back on. So you might find better results, on a science setup where you don't care about that power transfer rate hit as much, but on an energy weapon build, that is a very, very negative aspect to this console. And even if you manage to get it to do good damage, on an energy weapon setup, it's probably just not going to be worth it in the end because of that debuff. Now, to demonstrate the visuals of this console, I've got it pulled up here in demo record from a PvP I did against my secondary account, and that is just sitting over here static. So I'm going to play this, and what you're going to see is it starts off with a tractor beam, similar to the Borg assimilated tractor beam, and then what it does is it will launch those chains out towards the target, and it will be random with each activation as to where these exactly land on the targeted foe, but it is a really neat animation, and the maximum distance supported is 10 kilometers, though if you look too closely, it is going to look a little bit funky, and especially being that this is a console that you can use on any ship, it's going to look a bit funky in some situations, but that is a really, really interesting design right there. And that's going to just do damage to the target until it's done a couple seconds later. And lastly is the Starship Trait Pakled Bag. When activating non-specialist bridge officer abilities, you will gain a stack of this buff for 10 seconds that provides plus 1% all damage, Cat 1, plus 1 current and max all power, plus 1% max hull capacity, which you'll get as temporary hit points, and you can have up to 15 of these stacks, and any stacks gained refresh the duration of all existing stacks. So at 15 stacks, that is 15% Cat 1 all damage, plus 15 current and max all subsystem power, and plus 15% of max hull capacity applied as temporary hit points. When I was looking at this trait, the damage buff, that's just 15% Cat 1. I know I need to do a video explaining what the damage categories mean, but for reference, that's like a third of one of your TAC consoles or ISOMAGs, so it's really not that much. The power buff is really the big part here. 15 current and max all power. That's cool, but do you really want to give up a trait slot for that? Probably not. And then the plus 1% of max hull capacity applied as temporary hit points. Even at 15%, that's not really that much, and temporary hit points don't have any resistance, so there might be some niche builds that are able to take advantage of that, but when I look at this trait, there really is just nothing about it that screams to me as being a must-have. With what this thing cost, this is a promo ship, so if you have the budget to get this ship, you can afford any of the other ships out there, and this is a trait where I look at the other options out there, and I don't know what I would drop for this. If I had 10 trait slots, maybe I would mess around with this for the power buff, but as is, I wouldn't be running this over your other big traits like Ruin of Our Enemies, Universal Designs, Tearing Goodbye. Like, it's an interesting concept, but just not quite good enough and too expensive. And now on to the summary. This is another promo ship where I feel like the main value of it really is the visuals. I'm really not impressed with this ship from a stats point of view. The ship itself, I think, is rather weak, especially being a promotional ship. And the accessories, they're not really that impressive either. That console wouldn't be as bad if it didn't actually nuke 25% of your power transfer rate, but the fact that it actually does that is really quite annoying for it. And the Starship Trait, again, if we had a bunch more slots, I could see myself slotting it in some situations, but with us having 7 trait slots, it doesn't do enough to beat out any of the existing top 7 options. So really, the main reason to get this is just the visuals. So if that's what you're into, then this is a really fun ship to play around with. The randomize function on this is really interesting to get some different combos on it. But that's pretty much it. So this is going to be going live on console the same day this video goes out. And I'd be curious to hear what you guys think of it. Have you picked one up, or are you planning to pick one up? Let me know down below. But that is going to be it for today. So as always, thank you to all channel members and viewers for the continued support. See you guys around.